Hey everyone, this is good morning or good night or good day, whenever you're watching this. Today I decided to do something a little bit different today, and I plan to do some readings for you. I plan to read from one of my favorite books of all time, well, series of books, The Lord of the Rings. I decided to do this heavy volume because a lot of people like this story, but a lot of people don't know about it. If you guys like this, I'll continue on reading, and I'll maybe even do more of J.R.R. Tolkien's other works, such as The Silmarillion and The Hobbit, if you want. But right now, I'll just do The Lord of the Rings for you, and let's see how this goes. I'm going to read you the first, most famous verse of all The Lord of the Rings. Even if you haven't watched it or haven't seen it, or haven't seen a copy of a book in a while, or haven't been on Tumblr, this is one of the most famous of all. 3 rings for the elven kings under the sky, 7 for the dwarf lords in their halls of stone, 9 for mortal men doomed to die, 1 for the Dark Lord on his dark throne, in the land of Mordor where shadows lie, 1 ring to rule them all, 1 ring to find them, 1 ring to bring them all, and in the darkness find them, in the land of Mordor where shadows lie. Now I shall read you the prologue. 1. Concerning hobbits. This book is largely concerned with hobbits, and from its pages a reader may discover much of their character and little of their history. Further information will be also found in the section from the Red Book of Westmarch that has already been published under the title of The Hobbit. That story was derived from the early chapters of the Red Book and composed by Bilbo himself, the first hobbit to become famous in the world at large, and called by him there and back again. Since they told of his journey and into the East and in his return, an adventure which later involved all hobbits in the great events of that age that are here related. Many, however, may wish to know more about this remarkable people from the outset. While some may not possess the earlier book for such readers, a few notes on the more important points are here collected from Hobbit lore, and the first adventure is briefly recalled. Hobbits are an obtrusive but very ancient people, more numerous formerly than they are today, for they love peace and quiet and good-tilled earth. A well-ordered and well-farmed countryside was their favorite haunt. They did not understand a machine more complicated than a forge bellow, a water mill, or a handling. Though they were skillful with tools, even in the ancient days, they were, as a rule, shy of Bigfoot, as they call us, and avoided us with dismay, and are becoming hard to find. They are quick of hearing and sharp-eyed, and though they are inclined to be fat, they do not hurry unnecessarily. They are nonetheless nimble and deft in their movements. They possess the art of disappearing swiftly and silently, while large folk whom they do not wish to meet come blundering by. This art they have developed until to men it may seem magical, but hobbits have never in fact studied magic of any kind, and their looseness is due solely to a professional skill that heredity and practice, and a close friendship with the earth have rendered inimitable by bigger and clumsier races. For they are a little people, smaller than dwarves, less stout and stocky, that are, even they are not actually much shorter, their height is variable, ranging from 2 to 4 feet, upon measuring. They seldom now reach 3 feet, but they have dwindled. They say that in the ancient days they were taller. According to the Red Book, Vandervorst took Bulror, son of Isengrim II, was 4'5" and able to ride a horse. He was surpassed in all Hobbits' records by only 2 famous characters of old, but the curious matter is dealt with in this book. As for the hobbits of the Shire, with whom these tales are concerned, in the days of their peace and prosperity, they were merry folk, and they dressed in bright colours. They were nobly fond of yellows and greens, and they seldom wore shoes, since their feet had tough leathery soles and were clad in thick curly hair, much like the hair of their heads, which was commonly brown. Thus the only craft they little practiced among them was shoemaking. But they had long and skillful fingers and could make many other useful useful and comely things. Their faces were good-natured, and rather than beautiful, broad, bright-eyed, red-cheeked, with mouths apt to laughter, to eating and drinking. And laugh they did, and eat and drink often, heartily, being fond of simple jests at all times, and 6 meals a day, when they could get them. They were hospitable and delighted in parties and in presents that they gave freely and eagerly accepted. It is plain, indeed, that in spite of later estrangements, hobbits are relatives of ours, far nearer to us than elves, and even then dwarves. Of old, they spoke languages of men, after their own fashion, and liked and disliked much of the same things that men did. But exactly our relationship is no longer can be discovered. The beginning of hobbits lies far back in the older days that are now lost and forgotten. Only the elves still preserve any record of that vanished time, and their traditions are concerned almost entirely of their own history, in which men appear seldom and hobbits are not mentioned at all. Yet it is clear that hobbits had, in fact, lived quietly in Middle-earth for many long years before other folk became even aware of them. The world being, after all, full of strange creatures beyond count, these little people seemed of very little importance. But in the days of Bilbo and Frodo, his heir, they suddenly became, by no wish of their own, both important and renowned, and troubled the councils of the wise and of the great. Those days, the third age of Middle-earth, are now long past, and shapes of all the lands have been changed. By the regions in which the hobbits they lived were doubtless the same as those in which they still linger. Northwest of the Old World, east of the sea, of their original home, hobbits in Bilbo's time preserved no knowledge. A love of learning other than genealogical lore was far from general among them, but there remained still a few in the older families who studied their books and gathered reports of old times and distant lands from elves, dwarves, and men. Their record began only after the settlement of the Shire, and their most ancient legends hardly looked further back than the Wandering days. It is clear, none the less, that from these legends and from the evidence that his peculiar words and customs, like many other folk, hobbits had a distant past moved westward. Their earliest tales seem to glimpse a time when they dwelt in the upper vales of the Anduin, between these of the Greenwood, the Grey, and the Misty Mountains. Why they later undertook the hard and perilous crossing of the mountains into Eredor is no longer certain. Their accounts speak of a multiplying of men in the land, and of the shadow that fell on the forest. So it became darkened, and its new name was Mirkwood. Before the crossing of the mountains, the hobbits had already become divided into 3 somewhat different breeds: Harfoots, Doors, and Fellowhides. The Harfoots were browner of skin, smaller and shorter, and they were beardless and bootless. Their hands and feet were neat and nimble. They preferred highlands and hillsides. The Doors were broader and heavier in build. Their feet and hands were larger. They preferred flat lands and riversides. The Fellowhides were fairer of skin and also hair. They were taller and slimmer than the others, and they were lovers of trees and woodlands. The Harfoots had much to do with dwarves in ancient times, and long lived in the foothills of the mountains. They lived westward early, and roamed over Eredor as far as Weathertop, while the others were still in the Wilderland. They were the most normal and representative variety of the hobbits, and far the most numerous. They were most inclined in settling in one place, and longest preserved the ancestral habit of living in tunnels and holes. The Stoors lingered long by the banks of the great river Anduin, and were less shy of men. They came west after the Harfoots followed the course of the Loudwater southward, and there many of them dwelt between Thorbrad and the borders of Dunland, before they moved north again. The Fellowhides, the least numerous, were the northerly branch, and they were more friendly with elves than other hobbits were, and had more skill in language and song than in handicraft. Of old, they preferred hunting to tilling. They crossed the mountain north of Rivendell and came down to the river Harwell. In Eredor they mingled with other kinds that had proceeded with him, but being somewhat bolder and more adventurous than they were often found as leaders or chieftains among clans of the Harfoots or Stores. Even in Bilbo's time, the strong fellow Hildestan could still be noted among the greater families such as the Tooks or the Masters of Buckland. In the westlands of Eredor, between the Misty Mountains and the Mountain of Lune, the hobbits found both men and elves. Indeed, a remnant still dwelt there of Dunedain. The kings of men came over the Sea of Westerness, and there they dwindled fast, and the lands of the North Kingdom were falling far and wide into waste. There was room to spare for incomers, and ere long the hobbits began to settle in ordered communities. Most of their early settlements had long disappeared and had been forgotten in Bilbo's time. But one of the first to become important and still endured, though reduced in size, this was at Bree and at Chetwood, that lay round some 40 miles east of the Shire. It was in the early days doubtless that the hobbits learned their letters and began to write after a manner of the Dunedain, who had in their long before learned an art from the elves. In those days also they forgot whatever language they had used before, and spoke ever after the common speech, or Westeron, as it is named, that was current through all the lands of the king from Erenor to Gondor, and all about the coast of the Sea of Belfast to Lune. Yet they kept a few words of their own, as well as their own names of the months and days, and a great store of personal names out of the past. About this time, legend among hobbits first became history with a reckoning of years. For it was 1601st year of the third age that the Fahrenheit brothers, Marcho and Blanco, set out from Bree, and having obtained permission from the High King of Fornos. Side note, as recorded of Gondor related that this was Eorled, the 20th of the northern line, which came to an end with Erdovan 300 years later. They crossed the brown river of Barradun, which following the hobbits they passed over the bridge of stone bows that had been built in the days of the powers of the northern kingdom, and they took all the land beyond to dwell in. Between the river and the far downs, all that was demanded of them was that they should keep the great bridge in repair, and other bridges and roads, feet of the king's messengers in acknowledgment of his lordship. Thus began Shire reckoning. For the first year of crossing of the Brandywine, as hobbits termed the name, became year 1 of the Shire, and later dates were reckoned from it. Side note, thus the years of the third age in the reckoning of the elves and the Dunedain may be found by adding 1600 to the date of Shire reckoning. At once the western hobbits fell in love with the new land, and they remained there, as soon passed once more out of history of men and elves. While they were still a king, they were in his name his subjects, though they were in fact ruled by their own chieftains, and meddled not in the events in the world outside. To the last battle of Fornos, with the witch lord of Angmar, they sent some bowmen to aid the king, or so they maintained, though no tale of men recorded it. But in the war of the North Kingdom ended, and the hobbits took the land for their own, they chose from their own chief a thing to hold authority of the king that was gone. Therefore 1,000 years there was little troubled by wars, and they prospered and multiplied after the dark plague, until the disaster of the long winter and the famine that followed it. Many thousands then perished, but the days of dearth, from 1150 to 1160, were at a time of this tale long past, and the hobbits had again become accustomed to plenty. The land was rich and kindly, though it had been long deserted when they had entered it. It had before been well tilled, and the earth had once had many farms, cornlands, vineyards, and woods. 40 leagues it stretched from the far downs to the Brandywine Bridge, and 50 from the northern moors to the marshes in the south. The hobbits named it the Shire, as a region the authority of their saying, and a district of well-ordered business, and there in the plenty corner of the world they piled their well-ordered business of living, and they heeded less and less of the world outside, where dark things moved until they came to think that peace and plenty were the rule of Middle Earth, and the right of all sensible folk. They forgot or ignored what little had ever known of the guardians of their labor, of those that had made it the long peace of the Shire possible. They were in fact sheltered, and they had ceased to remember it. At no time the hobbits of any kind been warlike, and they had never fought among themselves. In the olden days they had, of course, been often obliged to fight to maintain themselves in a hard world, but in Bilbo's time this was very ancient history. The last battle before this story opens, indeed the only one that had ever been fought within the borders of the Shire, was beyond living memory. The Battle of Green Fields, Shire reckoning 1147, in which Barbatus took, routed an invasion of orcs. Even the weather had grown milder, and the wolves that had once been outraving out of the north bitter white winters were now only a grandfather's tale. So they were still some store of weapons in the Shire, and they were used mostly as trophies or hangings above hearths or on the walls, or gathered in the museum of Michael Delving, the Malcolm House, it was called. For anything the hobbits had no immediate use for, they were unwilling to throw away what they called Malcolm. Their dwellings were apt to become rather crowded with Malcolm, and many of the presents that passed from hand to hand were of that sort. Nonetheless, ease and peace had left these people still curiously tough, though they were, if it came to, difficult to daunt or to kill, and were perhaps so unwillingly fond of good things, not least becoming that they could, when to put it to it, do without them, and could survive rough handling by grief, foe, or weather, in a way that astonished those who did not know them well, or look no further than their bellies and their well-fed faces. Though slow to quarrel, and for sport killing nothing that lived, they were daunting at bay, doughy at bay, and ye could still handle arms. They shot well with a bow, for they were keen-eyed and sure at the mark. Not only with bows and arrows, if any hobbit stooped for a stone, it was well to get quickly under cover, as all trespassing beasts knew very well. All hobbits had originally lived in holes in the ground, so they believed in such dwellings, and they felt most at home. In the course of time, they had been obliged to adopt other forms of abode. Actually, in the Shire, Bilbo's day, it was, as rule, only the richest and poorest hobbits that maintained the old custom. Poorest went on living in burrows and most primitive kinds, mere holes indeed, while only one window or none, while well-to-do still constructed more luxurious versions of this simple diggings of old. But suitable sites for these large and ramifying tunnels, or smiles as they were called them, were not everywhere to be found in flats and low-lying districts of the hobbits, as they multiplied and began to build above ground. Indeed, even the hilly regions of the older villages, such as Hobbiton or Tuckerburrow, or in the chief township of the Shire, Michael Delving's on the White Downs, they were many houses of wood, brick, or stone. They were especially favored by millers, smiths, ropers, and cartwrighters, and others of that sort, for even they had holes to live in, and hobbits had long been accustomed to build sheds and workshops. The habit of building farmhouses and barns were said to be begun among the inhabitants of the marsh down by the Brandywine. The hobbits of the quarter of East Farthing were rather large and heavy-legged, and wore dwarf boots in muddy weather, but they were well known to be stores in the large part of their blood, and indeed shown by down many grew on their chins. No Harfoot or The holes of Shire hobbits were often large and inhabited by large families. Bilbo and Frodo's valiants were bachelors, very unexceptional, as they were also in many other ways, such as their friendship with the elves. Sometimes, as in the case of the Tooks of Great Smiles, or the Brandy Bucks of Brandy Hall, many generations of relatives lived in a comparative peace together in one ancestral and many-tenanted mansion. All hobbits were in any case clannish and reckoned upon their relationship with great care. They drew long and elaborate family trees with innumerable branches. In dealing with hobbits, it is important to remember who is related to whom, and in what degree. It would be impossible in this book to set out a family tree that included even more important members and more important families at the time, which these tales tell us. The genealogical trees at the end of the Red Book of Westmarch are a small book in themselves, and all but hobbits would find them exceedingly dull. Hobbits delight in such things if they were accurate. They like to have books filled with things that they already knew, set out fair and square, with no contradiction. But, other than that, we have come to the end of the first part of the prologue. Next will be 2 concerning Pipeweed. Hope you guys like this one. Interesting fact about J.R.R. Tolkien. He wrote 3 letters to the Nazis, each one being more insulting than the other. So, go J.R.R. Tolkien for not liking the Nazis.